He thought he had the perfect marriage, until he caught her with another man at the biggest gala of the year. But what he does next will shock you. The grand ballroom at the Sterling Heights Plaza in Chicago was alive with music and laughter. Rachel twirled a glass of champagne in her hand, her gaze drifting under the golden glow of the chandeliers. Her fitted emerald green dress caught the light, highlighting her striking figure. Her smile was radiant, drawing attention from many around the room, including her colleague, Ryan. "Rachel, you look absolutely stunning tonight," Ryan said, his gaze lingering a little longer than a casual compliment warranted. "Thanks, Ryan," she replied, her voice laced with playful warmth. "You're looking pretty sharp yourself." Ryan, charming and self-assured, was everything Rachel felt was absent in her marriage. Across the ballroom, her husband Ethan, 48, stood by the bar, watching her with a heavy heart, his face shadowed by suspicion and sadness. He had noticed the subtle shifts in her behavior, the late nights, secretive phone calls, the growing distance between them. Ethan, a reserved but determined man, was an architect who prided himself on details. Tonight, those details confirmed his worst fears. He took a sip of his whiskey, his gaze fixed on Rachel as she laughed at something Ryan had said, lightly touching his arm in response. That simple gesture felt like a dagger to Ethan's heart. They had talked before about her behavior, but Rachel had always brushed off his concerns, insisting he was being paranoid and possessive. As the evening progressed, Rachel's attention toward Ryan grew more pronounced. She leaned in, whispered something in his ear, and laughed just a bit too loudly at his jokes. Ethan's grip on his glass tightened, a simmering storm within him that he struggled to contain. Across the room, he noticed Julia, a friend of his from college, observing him with a worried expression. She knew Ethan well and sensed something was deeply wrong. "Would you like to dance?" Ryan asked Rachel smoothly, offering his hand. "I'd love to," she replied, her eyes shining with a mix of excitement and defiance. They moved to the dance floor, and Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. He couldn't endure this any longer, he needed to confront her, to end this humiliation. In that moment, an idea struck him, a calculated plan he would soon bring into motion. Determined, he walked over to the dance floor, masking his emotions under a calm demeanor. "Mind if I cut in?" he asked, his voice steady yet laced with an edge. Rachel looked at him with mild annoyance. "Ethan, can't you see I'm busy?" Ignoring her response, Ethan turned to Ryan, his eyes narrowing. "I think it's time you found someone else to dance with." Ryan raised his hands in mock surrender, flashing an easygoing smile. "No problem, man. She's all yours." As Ryan walked away, Ethan turned back to Rachel, his voice a controlled whisper. "What exactly are you doing here, Rachel?" Rachel's smile faded into a cold laugh. "It's just a dance, Ethan. Don't make it into something it's not." "It's not just a dance," Ethan replied, his voice tight with restrained anger. "You've been flirting with him all night." Rachel rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Am I? Do you think I haven't noticed the late nights, the secret calls? Do you think I'm blind?" Rachel sighed, her patience waning. "Ethan, I am not your property. I don't need you monitoring my every move." A flicker of pain crossed Ethan's face. "So that's it? You think you can do whatever you want, as long as I don't find out?" Rachel shrugged, dismissively. "I'm just having fun, Ethan. Stop overreacting." Ethan took a step back, his eyes clouded with a mixture of disappointment and sorrow. "If that's how you feel, maybe we need to reevaluate this marriage." Rachel's gaze shifted, her expression unreadable. "Maybe we do." Turning on his heel, Ethan walked away, his thoughts racing as he navigated through the crowd. He glanced around and spotted Julia by the bar, her concerned gaze following him. As he approached, she placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, are you all right?" she asked, her tone soft but probing. Ethan looked at her, his resolve hardening. No, Julia. I'm done with this. I can't let her keep humiliating me. Julia nodded, understanding his pain. If you need someone to talk to, you know I'm here. He managed a tight smile. Thanks, Julia. Actually, I might need your help. Together, they moved to a quieter corner. Ethan outlined a plan he had quickly pieced together, a way to gather undeniable proof of Rachel's actions. He was tired of feeling powerless, and Julia, being an old friend, understood the situation all too well. She agreed to help, and they began coordinating the steps Ethan needed to take to confront Rachel once and for all. Meanwhile, the night wore on, and Rachel felt a sense of victory. She had asserted her independence and satisfied her need for excitement. She found Ryan near the bar, waiting with a fresh drink in hand. "Everything okay?" Ryan asked, noting her return. "Everything's fine," Rachel replied with a light smile. Ethan just needed a bit of a reality check. Ryan chuckled, handing her the drink. "Well, I'm glad you're back. It was getting a little quiet here without you." She took a sip, the champagne's fizz energizing her as she leaned in close to Ryan, their conversation slipping into flirtation once again. In the shadows, Ethan was watching. He saw everything and felt a sense of calm settle over him, knowing he'd taken the first step to regaining control. By tomorrow, he would confront her, and their lives would change. Ethan drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The city lights of Chicago cast a hazy glow over the streets as he navigated through familiar roads. Rachel sat beside him, her face turned toward the window, oblivious to the tension simmering beside her. Finally, breaking the silence, Rachel glanced his way. "Ethan, are you really this upset? It was just a dance." Ethan took a deep breath, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "Rachel, we need to talk, but not tonight." A slight look of discomfort crossed her face, and she nodded. "Fine. We'll talk tomorrow." That night, while Rachel slept, Ethan lay awake, his mind racing. He knew what he had to do. Tomorrow would be a defining moment. He was tired of being manipulated and hurt by her actions, and now, he was prepared to confront her with the truth. As dawn broke, Rachel woke up with a slight headache. She blinked against the soft morning light filtering through the curtains and turned, expecting to find Ethan beside her, but his side of the bed was empty. Confused, she sat up and noticed a suitcase placed near the door. Her heart skipped a beat. Beside it, on the nightstand, lay a note scrawled in Ethan's unmistakable handwriting. "Rachel, you have until midnight to leave." The words hit her like a punch. Panic surged through her as she read the note again, trying to make sense of it. She glanced around the room and then rushed into the hallway, hoping to find Ethan. But he was nowhere in sight. Moving frantically, she stumbled into the living room, her gaze settling on Ryan, who was stretched out on the couch, still asleep. Empty glasses and a bottle of wine littered the coffee table, a silent reminder of last night's escapade. "Ryan," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. "Wake up." Ryan groaned, opening his eyes in confusion. "Rachel? Where am I?" Rachel's voice trembled as she looked around, still shaken. "Ethan found out about us. I think. He left me this note, telling me to leave." Ryan's face paled. He sat up, rubbing his forehead. "What are you talking about? I thought things were fine between you two." Shaking her head, Rachel dropped into a chair, her hands shaking. "Apparently, they're not. He saw us last night, and he can't take it anymore." Ryan stared at her, concern flickering in his eyes. "So, what are you going to do?" Rachel looked down, the gravity of the situation settling over her. "I don't know, Ryan. I have nowhere to go." Ryan reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Rachel. We'll figure something out." Rachel nodded weakly, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Thank you, Ryan. I never thought it would come to this." As they sat in silence, Rachel's mind raced with possible solutions. But as the weight of Ethan's ultimatum loomed, she felt trapped, uncertain of what steps to take next. "I need to leave," Rachel finally whispered, a hint of desperation in her voice. "I can't stay here after this." Ryan nodded, his face serious. "Do you have everything you need? Clothes? Money?" Rachel shook her head, her voice barely a murmur. "I don't have much. Just a few things, but it's not enough." "Let's find you a safe place for tonight," Ryan suggested. "You can gather what you need, and I'll help you figure out the rest." They quickly packed a small bag, and Ryan led her to his car parked outside. The morning air was crisp, a stark contrast to the heaviness she felt inside. They drove in silence, winding through the streets of Chicago until they arrived at the Roosevelt Inn, a modest hotel tucked away from the bustling downtown. Ryan handled the check-in, insisting on covering the cost. "You need a place where Ethan won't find you," he said softly, handing her the room key. "Stay here for now, and we'll make a plan." Rachel took the key, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and guilt. "Thank you, Ryan. I don't know what I'd do without you." Inside the small but clean hotel room, she collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion and regret washing over her. The events of the last 24 hours played back in her mind like a cruel movie. How had things spiraled so quickly? She had only been seeking a bit of excitement, a break from the monotony. But now, she was on the brink of losing everything. With a deep breath, Rachel took out her phone, staring at Ethan's contact for a moment. She dialed his number, her heart pounding with every ring. But there was no answer, only the empty ringing echoing in her ears. She tried again, only to be met with the same silence. Just as she was about to hang up, a message popped up from an unknown number. "Leave by midnight. I have everything documented. There will be consequences if you don't." The words left her frozen, the gravity of the situation pressing down on her. Tears filled her eyes as she read the message over and over, each word a reminder of the destruction she'd caused. Meanwhile, back at home, Ethan was with Julia, going over the evidence he had collected. His resolve strengthened with each piece of proof, photos, texts, and witness statements. He was done with the lies, the betrayal. He had spent years devoted to Rachel, only to be cast aside when she sought a thrill. "You're doing the right thing, Ethan," Julia said, her voice steady as she placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Sometimes you have to let go to find peace." Ethan nodded, though a flicker of sadness crossed his face. "I never thought it would come to this, but I can't keep pretending." Back at the Roosevelt Inn, Rachel sat in silence, the weight of Ethan's ultimatum heavy on her shoulders. Her thoughts spun with regret, shame, and a gnawing sense of fear. She had played with fire, thinking she was untouchable, but now the flames were closing in. A knock at the door startled her, breaking the tense silence. She opened it to find Ryan, holding a paper bag with coffee and breakfast from a nearby cafe called the Cornerstone Coffee House. "I figured you might need this," he said, offering her a tentative smile. Rachel accepted the bag, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you, Ryan. I really don't know how I got to this point." Ryan sat down across from her, his expression thoughtful. "You know, sometimes we make choices thinking they're harmless. But when we're standing at the edge, we realize we've gone too far." Rachel took a sip of coffee, the warmth calming her nerves. "Ethan was always so distant. I felt invisible. I thought a little excitement would bring life back into me. But now, I've lost everything." Ryan reached over, his hand resting gently over hers. "Rachel, you're not alone in this. I'll help you, whatever you need." A sudden urgency filled Rachel. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I need to talk to Ethan. I can't just disappear without at least trying to make things right. She picked up her phone, her heart hammering as she dialed his number again. This time, after a few rings, Ethan answered. "What do you want, Rachel?" His voice was cold, detached. "Ethan, please. I need to talk to you. Face to face. Just give me a chance to explain." There was a pause before he responded. "You had plenty of chances, Rachel. I asked you over and over, and you lied every time." Her voice wavered, desperation creeping in. "I know. I was wrong, Ethan. But please, let me see you. Just one more time." Ethan sighed. "Fine. Meet me at Millstone Park at noon. But don't expect anything." As the call ended, Rachel felt a surge of both relief and dread. She turned to Ryan, who had been listening quietly. "He agreed to meet me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have to try and make him understand, even if he never forgives me." Ryan nodded, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "Go talk to him. I'll be here if you need me afterward." At noon, Rachel arrived at Millstone Park, a peaceful spot in Chicago with shaded paths and benches overlooking a small lake. She scanned the area, spotting Ethan standing near the water, his hands in his pockets, his posture rigid. Gathering her courage, she approached him, feeling the weight of her guilt with each step. Ethan's expression was unreadable as she stopped a few feet away. "Thank you for meeting me," Rachel began, her voice soft, almost pleading. Ethan looked at her, his gaze hard. "I'm only here to hear what you have to say. After that, we're done." Rachel swallowed, her hands twisting nervously. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I know I hurt you, and I know I messed up. But I was feeling. I don't know, invisible. I was searching for something, but I didn't realize how much I was losing in the process." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You mean you didn't realize how much you were taking from me? I trusted you, Rachel. I thought we were building something real, something lasting." She took a shaky breath. "I know, and I was selfish. I thought I could have both, the stability you gave me and the thrill I thought I needed. But I see now that I was wrong. I took you for granted." Ethan shook his head, his voice tinged with bitterness. "It's too late for apologies, Rachel. You chose this path, and you didn't care about the consequences until now." Her eyes filled with tears. "Is there no way we can try again? I'll do anything to fix this. I'll prove to you that I can change." Ethan looked away, his face a mixture of hurt and frustration. "You're only saying that because you're facing the consequences. You didn't care about what it did to me until you lost your safety net." Before Rachel could respond, a familiar voice called out from behind them. She turned to see Julia approaching, her face set with determination. "I thought I might find you here," Julia said, looking at Ethan. Rachel's brow furrowed, surprised by Julia's sudden presence. "What are you doing here?" Julia crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "I'm here because Ethan deserves better than to be manipulated again. I've known him for years, and I can't stand by and watch you hurt him any longer." Rachel's cheeks flushed with embarrassment and anger. "This is between me and Ethan." Julia shot her a cold look. "No, Rachel. It became everyone's business the moment you decided to betray him. I was the one who saw him falling apart because of you, and I'll be damned if I let you twist the knife any further." Ethan held up a hand, his voice calm but firm. "Julia, I appreciate your support, but I need to handle this myself." Julia looked at him, her expression softening. "I just want you to be okay, Ethan." He nodded. "I will be. Thank you." As Julia walked away, Rachel felt the finality of the moment sink in. Ethan's face was set, his decision clear. She realized then that there would be no reconciliation, no second chances. Ethan took a step back. Goodbye, Rachel. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but it won't be with me." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the park, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. Rachel stood in the park, feeling hollow and defeated as she watched Ethan walk away, his figure disappearing into the distance. The reality of her choices settled on her shoulders with a crushing weight. She had gambled with her marriage, chasing a fleeting thrill, and now she was left with nothing but regret. Slowly, she made her way back to the Roosevelt Inn, her mind swirling with memories and what-ifs. When she reached her room, she found Ryan waiting, concern etched on his face. "How did it go?" he asked, although he could already guess from her expression. Rachel slumped into the chair by the window, staring blankly ahead. "It's over. Ethan doesn't want anything to do with me. He's done." Ryan sighed, sitting across from her. "I'm sorry, Rachel. I know this isn't what you wanted." For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the situation hanging between them. Finally, Ryan leaned forward, a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You still have a chance to rebuild, Rachel. Maybe not with Ethan, but with yourself. Take some time. Figure out what you really want." Rachel nodded numbly. She knew he was right, but the thought of starting over felt daunting. She had no idea where to begin. The next few weeks passed in a blur as Rachel moved from one temporary hotel to another, trying to find stability. She distanced herself from Ryan, realizing that her dependency on him had only clouded her judgment. She began taking small steps to reclaim her life, seeking therapy and focusing on understanding the deeper reasons behind her actions. She knew it would be a long journey, but she was determined to change. Meanwhile, Ethan threw himself into rebuilding his own life. The divorce had left scars, but it also opened the door for new beginnings. One evening, at the encouragement of Julia, he signed up on a dating app, unsure of what he was looking for but open to the idea of moving on. That's when he stumbled upon Lily's profile, a warm smile, her eyes bright with kindness. Intrigued, he sent her a message, not expecting much. To his surprise, their conversation flowed effortlessly. They talked about everything, from life's simple pleasures to their shared love for art and nature. Lily, understanding and patient, was a stark contrast to the turmoil he had experienced with Rachel. They met for coffee at Brood Awakening, a cozy spot near the lake, and their casual outing turned into hours of laughter and conversation. Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of calm and joy. It was as if he'd found someone who understood his journey without needing to explain every scar. As the months went by, Ethan and Lily's relationship blossomed. They spent weekends exploring Chicago, discovering hidden gems in the city, and taking spontaneous road trips to nearby towns. Lily's gentle nature and genuine warmth helped Ethan heal from the wounds of his past. She was supportive, never prying, and she made him feel safe in a way he hadn't felt in years. One sunny afternoon, they were walking hand in hand through Grant Park, the city's famous green space by the lake, with the Chicago skyline towering in the background. As they paused to admire the view, Ethan realized that he was no longer haunted by his past. The hurt he once carried had transformed into a deep appreciation for the peace he'd found with Lily. He knew, without a doubt, that he wanted to build a future with her. Months later, Ethan proposed to Lily on a secluded beach during a weekend getaway. With the sun setting behind them, she said yes, tears of happiness in her eyes as they embraced, knowing they had found something truly lasting. They married in a small ceremony with friends and family, exchanging vows that were filled with promises of love, loyalty, and new beginnings. Together, Ethan and Lily created a life filled with joy and warmth. They built a home where laughter echoed through the rooms, and they soon welcomed their first child, a daughter with Lily's bright eyes and Ethan's calm demeanor. 2 years later, they were blessed with a son, who brought even more laughter and light to their home. Ethan embraced fatherhood wholeheartedly, relishing every milestone with his children. He found peace in the quiet moments, reading bedtime stories and watching his kids play in the backyard. Lily, with her boundless kindness and love, was the anchor that held their family together, and Ethan felt a profound gratitude for the life they shared. Years later, during a family trip to Chicago, Ethan noticed a familiar figure sitting alone on a bench near Navy Pier. It was Rachel. Her once vibrant energy seemed dulled, her clothes worn, and her gaze distant. She looked up, meeting Ethan's eyes for a fleeting moment before looking away, as if the weight of his gaze was too much to bear. Sensing his shift in mood, Lily followed his gaze. She gently squeezed his hand, understanding without words. "Is that someone you know?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Yes. That's someone I used to know very well." A mix of emotions stirred within him, pity, relief, and, above all, a profound sense of closure. He realized that he had found everything he'd ever needed with Lily and their children. Rachel was a chapter of his past, one he had learned from but no longer held any power over him. Lily offered a warm smile, her gaze filled with understanding. "Whatever happened then, it brought you here, to us." Ethan looked at her, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Yes, it did. And I wouldn't change a thing." As they walked away from the pier, their children laughing and skipping ahead of them, Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He had found his way to happiness through forgiveness and love, and his life was richer than he had ever imagined. The past was behind him, and his future, filled with endless possibilities, was more beautiful than he had ever dreamed.